Hey, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to RT Machine Podcast. We're on episode 7. We have a great cast of guys here today and pretty packed schedule. We're going to go around the room and introduce everybody. I'm your host, Brian Kraling, sales team.
Dean Brown. I run the board.
You got Ryan over here.
And Cody.
It's the second time Cody's on now.
Yep, second time. So I'm covering 3/4 of PA as far as the sales territory, and keeps me busy, buddy.
Sure does.
Nate, I'm from the service side.
And Kyle here, back for another episode.
Back at another episode. We're going to spotlight Nate a little bit in the beginning here. Nate, why don't you give us a little bit of your background and how you got started with RT Machine?
Well, I graduated high school and did 10 years in the audio and video world, which basically has nothing to do with woodworking.
Really?
Yeah, not a whole lot. I mean, the
okay.
speakers are made with wood, but I didn't have anything with that side of it. And then one day, my cousin Andy, who actually worked here, says, "Hey, we're looking to hire some help." I'm like, "Hey, what the heck?" So I came in, had a interview, we'll say, and they offered me the job as basically as like a helper. And within a few months, I was basically on my own, learning as I went. So I've been doing this 5 years in October, and
Time flies, doesn't it?
time sure does fly. But yeah, working on a lot of planers lately.
That's one of your specialties. You're the man when it comes to planers.
That's what they say.
What was what'd you have going on the past week?
This week we set up a 282 in the shop to get some demos on it. See about a customer potentially interested in that one, I guess.
Yep.
So we ran that one. It's actually a very, very nice machine for the age of it, which I don't think it's really that old.
No, it's probably 20 years old at
Yeah,
this point. It's not
but
super old, but
Pretty solid machine as it sits.
yep.
That customer was debating back and forth between a Strato plane or a Newman, and they're running a Strato plane right now in their mill. They were worried switching over to a Newman, what the cut quality would be like. So that's where we got into running the demo on this machine to be able to show the Newman quiet cut heads versus the Strato plane that they're used to.
How did that turn out?
We haven't ran it yet.
Oh, okay.
It's just getting
coming up,
set up
right.
now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to be run on Monday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, today we thought we would, start out at the bottom side of planers and take you all the way up to the top and give you the ins and outs of everything that's going on. But what do we have? The NHLA.
So coming up next Friday, August 25th, there is a memorial shoot for, it's a fund that was set up by a group of guys that were friendly with Bob Rohrbaugh. He passed away here several months ago, and there's going to be 4 of us going to the show. It's Eric, Ryan, Dean, and myself.
Yep.
Bob is a huge supporter of the NHLA and the Pennsylvania Forest Products Association and a whole bunch of other different associations, more so in the primary end of things than the secondary, which is what we're more keen to. But I met Bob several times, and he was a great guy. It's an excellent opportunity. With the NHLA is National Hardwood Lumber Association, and it's kind of what the standard here in the U.S. has been set for as far as grading rules and everything like that. Your 3 common, 2 common, 1 common, FAS, all that good jazz.
Now, are they using all of the same grading as we are overseas, or is that a whole different grading?
That's a good question, and I'm not 100% on that. I know from the standpoint of the U.S., that's the standard, the National Hardwood Lumbermen's Association, Lumber Association. That's what they're set up for. That's what all the graders and everything here in the U.S. are basing their grades off of for that nature. I'm not 100% whether they're using those same rules overseas, whether they're a little more lax or whether they're more strict or not. I mean, these have been used for over 100 years now. I think 1898 or 1896 is when the NHLA was founded and
set the standard.
1898, 37 lumbermen met in Chicago.
Yep. So it's a big proponent of our industry. It's what the lumber grading and the products that we're creating above and beyond that, it's the rules. That's what they have it set for. So, Bob, circling back to him, he was a Penn State graduate back in 1972, the Bachelor of Science in Forest Science, and he went to work for his father's sawmill operation after he graduated. And he worked there until 2021, where him and his brothers ended up selling the company to another company, which just expanded upon their operation. I'm blanking on who they sold it to, but they retired and, stayed on for a little while. And like we said, Bob unfortunately passed away here a few months back. So, and he had his hand in setting up this memorial fund a little bit too, and with some of his friends and everything. And this Claybird shoot that we're going to, it's going toward a scholarship fund, which is set up to help young men and women attend Memphis. That's where the NHLA grading school is at. So it'll help offset some of the costs and provide scholarship money and everything like that for them.
It's pretty cool to know where all the fundraiser money is going to and different things.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, there's going to be additional fundraisers, and I'm sure there's other ways, and I need to dig into that a little bit. I've got a couple contacts that I know that are kind of heading up this fund, and, if anybody has questions on how you can contribute to it, just reach out to us, and we'll get you the proper contacts, on who you need to speak with about that. So, you guys have anything else that you want to talk about here with that? I have stories, I can tell you guys too regarding Bob. So,
how did we get invited to go shoot?
Well, I got the email. I grabbed Ryan and Eric, and it was like, who should we?
Kind of had to be there. Kind of.
Yeah, kind of. It's like, who should I grab for the 4th? And it's like, let's take Dean.
And did you say registration is open yet till Monday?
Yeah, Monday.
Oh, maybe
Okay.
service team could put a team in here.
There we go. Service versus sales.
Yep.
Oh,
there-
we're gonna have some stiff competition here.
Yep. If you guys want to do that, I can get you in contact with.
Sounds like there's going to be a lot of shell loading over the weekend.
Sorry for anyone listening on Wednesday. This is closed.
So, but no, if that's something you guys are interested in, we could get you the info and you can look into it. There's still a little bit of time. The 21st is the shut off for registration. So,
That'd be pretty fun.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't think a lot of people understand how much the grading goes into and really how much training is involved in understanding all the different species. And
yep. Yeah, it's critical. And the price that you pay for lumber is set off of these grading rules too. And there's fluxes, and
Yeah.
everything, but you're not going to pay for FAS or 1 common what you're going to pay for 2 common or 3 common. It helps. And these different grading scales is what sets the pricing and everything like that too. So, but yeah, no, grading is important, and it's more so, again, it's critical in the sawmill industry and in the grading industry. It's a little less critical for us. And I think when we had Keith on, he kind of hit on that, it's a good skill to have, but for us, it's more important as a lumber purchaser than, for an actual guy out in the field, because what our customers are using is typically has its own rule sets too. This is more so, the way the industry is set up for how you purchase your lumber and how you sell the lumber and everything like that. So,
right, once you get down to the end user side, now gets a little bit more towards what the job is spec'd and what is actually going to fly.
It's my one customer runs. They buy their lumber in and they'll buy whatever per se they want, but then they'll break every single stack apart yet. And then they'll put their own grading rules on it. As for if they buy pine in, if it's all clear, they're buying high. It's not necessarily the clearness of it. It's how far apart the knots are for them.
Yep.
So they separate in bunk where they may have a ton of short knots, or not short knots, short spaces in between the knots that goes towards a certain product, and then spots where it's long knots, which is all the same grade, but
Are they just separating between close and
yes, close and
a spacing issue? They're probably giving it some type of a spacing
Yes.
criteria.
yeah, think of it this way. There's some components out there that we're not seeing the backside. So say there isn't a visible knot, it's acceptable for that to be on the backside of a product, like a piece of molding, for example, that's getting nailed, stapled, glued, whatever
Right.
being done with. If there's a knot or a crack or something that's on the back and it's not all the way through to the front, that's where each individual has a higher grading rule, versus what the NHLA is. This is what this consists of, So every individual end user has additional things that they're looking for. What's an acceptable defect? What is not an acceptable defect? And that comes down into the process, and that could lead us into a whole other conversation, with regards to the scanning and chop saws and rip saws and everything like that too. And everybody's rules is different,
Right.
versus the National Hardwood Lumbermen's Association. They have specific rules.
Which is nice to keep that we've had this standard all these years with it, and it's stayed pretty true with the industry.
You don't have one guy out there trying to say this is one common and selling it to you at top dollar.
Right.
And another guy saying, well, mine's one common. It's much nicer selling it at the same price.
Well, and I've got photos from customers, and they're like, oh, what would you grade this? I'm like, I haven't the slightest clue. And it's like, teach their own, but from the National Hardwood Lumber Association, they're like, this does not qualify as what it should qualify, what I was sold it for, so they had that to take back up with the person they purchased it from.
So that's why the NHLA is so important.
It is.
Because when you start getting questions like that asked, and you don't have anybody who is qualified to give you an actual grade or to confirm for a end user that they paid extra for all clear or one common material, and they're actually getting a subpar product.
Correct. Yep. So
Wow, it's a pretty nice little. Do we know what kind of funds have been raised for?
not sure at this point. Definitely ask the question, and that'll be something that we can follow up on later. And like I said, I know there's a couple of people that are in charge of this fund and everything like that, and I know them, so I'll be able to talk to them a little bit more and see who the best point of contact is, and we can keep plugging it and keep talking and seeing how we can help out with this in general. So
On the planer side of items, we thought we'd start with from the very, let's call it the advanced hobbyist, going all the way up through to our dual-sided Newmans and Olivers.
Yeah, so there's so many different kinds of planers out there. When we start looking at what might fit your needs versus somebody else's, the spectrum is so big. Are we planing just a single surface? Are we doing two surfaces?
Or four.
Or four. Are we sanding after it? How much space consumption do you have? How much production do you need as well? They're all questions that we have to start asking when we start looking at what kind of machinery is correct for the user.
And then we get into the cutter head side of it, which is we just had a little bit of off-air pre-talk about what goes into the finishes. And so let's start with let's just say like a 15-inch Oliver planer and what somebody could expect.
So single-sided we're talking about?
Single-sided, yep.
That's something that a serious hobbyist would want. Someone that is not going to have a vast amount of production going through.
After you move past the tabletop.
Yep, after you move past the tabletop, yeah. Someone that's just looking to get started into planing or just like I said, a serious hobbyist that, wants a little higher quality product than just a DeWalt 13-inch tabletop planer there. So
Typically, them planers are coming with either a insert cutter head or a straight knife.
yep.
What's the difference between using a straight knife versus an insert for a machine like that?
So finish quality is going to be one, and I have customers that swear by straight knife heads just because it's a different style of finish quality on it. It comes down to spiral cutter heads. By nature, they're using inserts, so depending on how much material and how closely you're looking at it, you're going to see in the cut pattern, you'll see the actual individualized inserts if you're looking really closely at it. Versus a straight knife head, You think of it kind of also go into the molder world. There you're going to see a more defined knife marks per inch cutting pattern there. That's where some of the people that swear by these straight knife heads, which are significantly louder, that's one of the reasons why, because they're getting a glassier finish, kind of like a molding finish coming off of it. And it comes down to, how do you want to sell the product? I mean, do you want to sell this as something that is almost like a finish product that you can go and take to just a light sand on it or whatever? But most people coming out of their planer, they're going to sand it after the fact, be it through a wide belt sander or through a little hand orbital sander or whatever, and obviously it's just all for what the customer's looking for. Big thing with the spiral cutter heads, whatever brand is, they are significantly quieter from a decibel rating
Oh,
standpoint.
tremendously.
Yeah, most places build rooms around a straight knife planer because they're so loud.
Yep.
Most of them that I've seen on the road, they all have some kind of enclosure built around it because you can't stand beside it and carry a conversation with somebody because it's so loud.
Yep. Even when they're not cutting, they're loud too.
Mm-hmm.
You get that wind sound about it because of the fact that you have knives. Say you're working with a 24-inch wide machine, straight knife. You've got blades on there that are catching air every time they rotate there, versus more aerodynamic and just insert, with air gaps in there and so on with the insert cutter heads.
So for the hobbyist coming into it, the insert cutter head gives you, in today's world, it's almost becoming a little more standard.
Yep.
Even on the hobbyist style machines or light industrial, you're getting that smoother quality.
Yeah, short of a planer you buy at like a Lowe's or Home Depot anymore. Pretty much every planer that's being sold is being offered in one fashion or another, with pretty much exclusively a spiral cutter head. I had a customer here last year that wanted a straight knife machine. From a cost standpoint, that's one area. A straight knife machine will save you a couple bucks on the cost, because they were
desired anymore.
Yeah, they were going to modify it, but I couldn't find them a straight knife machine available, which at the time that wasn't that unsurprising, but still you could not find. Every machine had a spiral cutter head in it that was available here.
Was that a lower end machine, or is that like?
I was looking at the Oliver. It was it was a 25-inch wide Oliver I was looking at. So still, that's a $10,000 or $11,000 machine with a straight knife cutter head in it, but could not find one stateside.
That's crazy.
Yep.
We have one now.
We do have one now. That's an older machine.
It is an older machine.
That is old. $299.
So yeah, that's where we were just talking a little bit about, where you start out, cost wise. And obviously these are just like rough numbers, depending on what model and width of the planer and stuff. So, probably a base, let's just call it a 15-inch cast planer, you're going to be in that $2,500 to $4,000 range, into that. And then we're going to be jumping up into, let's just call it more of like the North Tech series of machine, and even the larger Oliver into that $10,000 to $15,000 range.
And more. It depends on how wide you want to go. One of our other sales guys quoted a brand new U.S. manufactured, I think it was a 24-inch machine. I think it was close to $70,000 for that machine.
Wow.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. Was that one head or two? Top
That's a
bottom?
single side.
Single side.
U.S. manufactured, yep.
Wow.
So,
Well, and a lot of this all depends on the heaviness of the machine.
yep.
The
Build quality.
the build quality really is what it starts coming to, the tolerances of the machines. We were just going over one of our newest brands, the female brand, and we were looking at the style of the cutter head and the differences in the cutter heads, which it had more of a swept chip load carrying away ability and only running 3 rows on that. And what we found was that they're running that at a higher RPM. What did you say, Nate, about 1,200 RPM?
1,200 more than most everybody else is at 36, and they're running at 48 or so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that adds in sort of like, well, like if you take away one cutter head, adding that many RPMs, that would about equal out
Yeah.
to about the same cuts per inch.
So, and some of the things that we were discussing a little bit would be keeping the cutter heads cooler. You know, being able to get rid of the chip load.
Yeah, if you actually have those blades spinning faster, you're going to create more of a like a vacuum type situation, blowing.
Or your flame.
More of a fan, actually.
It's more of a fan. It's more of
Yeah.
a fan blowing it up into the dust ports at a higher rate than a slow cut.
Yeah, and that's what leads us into improper dust collection.
Yep. And I mean, a lot of companies are guilty of this that are manufacturing machines. The dust collection and the pickup points are always last thought. So,
Oh, by the way, we should put some dust collection to this.
so some of the different machinery I've seen over the years, just based off of the way the dust is set up to be extracted from the machine, the actual pickup chutes and the manifolds and whatever, they're not right. And you know, it is what it is. So that's just like I said, it's afterthought a lot from manufacturers. So.
Your spiral's leading towards the left and your dust pickup port's on the right. So all of your dust is trying to be flung to the left when your port's sitting off to the right. It just
You know, you're working against the inertia of
Yep.
the cutter head. And these are all small things that even in the smallest operation to the biggest operation is what causes you maintenance items, your tooling getting dull quicker, and
Yep.
you know, just all the way along, and potential for fire hazard as well.
Yeah.
You know, there's quite a few things there that you start building that heat, and depending on the type of product you're running, you know, if you're running a pine or something like that, your chances of having a spark ignition
Yeah.
is greatly increased.
Well, and that brings us to the point, like last week's podcast with Green Street, you know, the comment was, well, this is the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
Sometimes there isn't that afterthought, you know. You
Yeah.
got to be thinking ahead and planning for this. And, I mean, think about it. 100 years ago, 50 years ago, dust collection wasn't even a thought. It's just like, oh, we'll worry about it later.
Put a
Build a
blower
broom.
on it, and we'll get it out in the yard somehow.
I
And
used a broom.
Build
Yeah.
it
Up
hit
off the
under the
floor.
meter.
Yeah,
Under
but
it.
as things have changed and technology's progressed, I mean, and you hit on it, you know, for tool life too. You know,
that's huge.
yep.
Yeah. You know, especially as you get into the bigger machines, the faster they're spinning, the more production you're running. You know, you're going through, and then that's downtime.
Yep.
You know, just not only did you get how many more thousand board feet out of that set of cutters to, you know, how many you didn't, you know.
Yep. And I mean, this kind of takes us back into the planer conversation. I mean, we started off talking there about just small machines. You know, now we're moving toward bigger, higher production machines. You know, I walk into a shop and the customer tells me, "Hey, I want to surface 100,000 board foot of lumber a week." I'm not going to sell them one of those little single-sided machines. You know, we're going to be talking about a double-sided machine. That's what it comes down to. You know, it's all throughput, you know, and you have to look at the machine's capabilities. You know, what can the Oliver Strata plane handle? What can a Newman EPR planer or a 382 machine or a 282, whatever? You just need to look at it from the standpoint of how much production do you actually need to accomplish, and then you get them the appropriate machine for the application.
I was just working with a guy probably last month, 2 months ago. We were going back and forth whether a planer sander was correct for him because he does a lot of. He were running a single-sided planer, one of the higher end single-sided units, and then they had a 3-head sander off to the side, so they'd run their panels through the planer, take it to the sander. Well, they'd run it back through the planer, hit the backside of it, then twice through the sander again. And the one thing we were talking about, like, well, why don't we add an extra head to your sander, put a planer on there, and then we can get rid of 2 touches. I'm like, well, that's great. But we also use our planer to do just lumber. Then it goes to our gang rip saw. It's like, well, at that point, then we kind of want to look at like a Strato plane because they do a very good job for rough lumber. So is weighing the benefits of doing it with a planer sander or a top and bottom planer. So that's another area where we start running into which machine is right. And it really comes down to the volume of what somebody's doing, which we can still run all of their rough lumber on a planer sander. We will pop the other heads up and let it pass through, and we don't hit it with the sanding heads. But you're not hitting both sides at once. So
Yeah, on some of the big straight knife machines, Nate, what are some of the challenges that you run across on the setups?
So a lot of it's your setup and is like the sharpening of it. If you don't get all the knives the same level when you're sharpening it or getting it set up, you'll really mess your setup, your product up as it comes out. I was just down in Tennessee a few months ago, and we were going through the grinding process on a straight knife machine, and we took, I think, 3 days sharpening it to get it right until the product actually came out perfect for them. Now, they were using it as a finish planer, so they weren't sanding it afterwards, but it was a tedious process.
What was the process that you did for the grinding on that? Was that in the machine?
Well, it was a Newman, so the top head stayed in the machine. Their grinder attaches to it, and then there was actually he made a homemade indexing bar that was pretty genius. It indexed the head where it's supposed to be, that it had a weight on it to keep it from bouncing around as you were grinding. But there was just issues with the grinding itself. Like, we were coming back and forth and got done, measure it, and you'd be off a couple thousandths from one end to the other, and you just had to keep on going on it. And they also let it go a little too long between sharpenings. They were joining it several times. They were trying to get away with, because it was a lot
So
faster.
they probably had a fair amount of warp to those blades as well.
Well, the land on it was like 1/8 of an inch, and you shouldn't get any more than maybe 30 seconds. And so it just took hours to grind it to get it back.
Explains the
sharp.
land a little bit.
Well, that's what happens when you run the joiner across it. It knocks the knives all to one level, because you're running a diamond stone, while it's spinning, so it knocks all the knives hopefully to the same level to get you that nice even cut. But they just did it too many times to make it too wide, so to grind it, it was, like I said, it took hours to do it, days almost, to get it back into an actual knife point. They're basically almost hitting it with butter knives when it was spinning, because they had it so knocked down.
What at that point, what could they have done to reduce that 3-day down period?
Sharpen it more often. They didn't want the downtime during their production, so they were doing whatever they could to get it running again. But that took long. If they would have just taken, I don't know, every quarter, let's say, and sharpened instead of twice a year, they would take it from 3 days to half a day or so.
Yeah, and that's pretty huge.
It is when they're running the production that they were trying to
And
get
something
out of it.
like that, really, as a maintenance standpoint, that should have just been done, called production early
Yep.
on a day. And
Yeah, just take a Friday or whatever and shut down a little early and sharpen it up. But they didn't want to do that. They got to get product out the door, so we got to keep running.
Well, and you hit on another point. It's important, sharpening, honing, whatever, what the customer's production is. Everybody asks, how frequently am I going to have to rotate these knives? How frequently am I going to have to sharpen it? It's going to depend on your material and the quality of your material you have going in there.
Yeah, what you want it to look like when it's done coming out of
Yep.
it.
So
That has to do with everybody in every industry. Everybody wants to know how long is a sandpaper going to last.
Yep.
Everything, and
it's all
they get annoyed at me when I don't actually give them an answer, because I can't. It doesn't.
That's always, how often do I have to sharpen it? I said, whenever your product starts to look bad.
Yeah.
If you don't like the way it looks, you got to sharpen it.
They think I'm trying to get out of a question or something when I say that. But
They're always looking
true.
for a number.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
if I run this many board feet, how long can I do it? It's
can't tell. Yeah.
Can't tell you.
Yeah.
well, depending on the species that's going through it.
Right.
They were running their wide belts, and they had like 5 or 6 wide belts in this finishing line. Well, every single break period, they rip this brand new paper out, whether it ran or not. Slide brand new paper in, and it was like, huh? And then next break, it
incredible.
was the same thing. So it was every 2.5, 3 hours they were changing the paper out, and it's 103 by 54 inch belts that they were swapping out, and it's like, well, do you want me to tell you the worst case scenario I've ever seen, or the guy who has the same paper in for 3 months, it's burnt? And it's like,
Yeah.
Just can't understand why it doesn't stand right.
Well, and
I want to be at that guy's shop, like at the racetrack with the used tires.
Yeah.
put a board in, start smoking.
here is a question that we can answer. How frequently do you suggest honing between sharpening? I mean, are we talking once or twice and then you sharpen, or?
You can, it depends. Like, it all depends on what you're running. Some customers I have do it 6 times between sharpenings, but they want it to look a little nicer. And the harder you do it, the longer it's going to take you to sharpen. And so the less frequently you can do it and between sharpenings is better for sharpening. But yeah, like I said, some people do it up to 6 times between sharpenings.
So that particular customer, what was the next process they ran to after that particular?
After we sharpened.
Yeah.
Then we had to run a joining on it, which was a wild time because you got I think that was a 6-knife straight knife cutter head spinning at 3,600 RPMs with no guarding on it while you're running a stone back and forth across it. So you're just throwing sparks everywhere in a wood shop, which is dangerous to begin with. But yeah, once we got it jointed down and had it all together, make sure you shut your dust collection off when you're doing that too, so you're not sucking sparks into your dust collection.
That's a big.
Get it all jointed up, and then we ran. That was actually had to do another half a day's worth of setup on it because it was so far out of whack because of the bad sharpening that they had on it. They had to make it loose enough to be able to just run product that we had to. It was a half a day's worth of adjusting pressure bars and chip breakers and everything to make it feed properly without getting stuck.
And what style machine was that one?
It was a Newman 382, I believe.
Okay.
You said finish before, didn't you?
What?
Didn't you say it was a finish planer?
Yeah, they were using it as a finish planer.
Oh, wow.
For most of their stuff. They had 3 other planers in the facility.
Yeah.
Were they going from that planer to a sander at that point?
Nope, straight to the customer.
Really?
Yep.
Well, it went out and got through a Marine Johnson, but yeah, right to the customer then.
Have you done one of those, that same machine with the insert style cutter head?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, they actually had 2 more of them there that we didn't have time to go over those because we were on that first one for a week, but the rest of them definitely needed some attention, but they were going to get.
So compared to their insert unit being in the same shop compared to the straight cutter head, are they thinking of switching those as well, or are they?
No, they're 2 spiral cutter head machines does the bulk of their material, and then the straight knife is what they were finish planing on.
Okay.
And when you say spiral and insert, we're talking about the Newman Quiet Cut.
Yeah, the Newman Quiet Cut head. Yeah.
That's now. Have you done any comparisons between like the itch heads on like a Straight plane versus the Newman Quiet Cut heads?
I haven't. I should. It would be kind of interesting to be able to actually visually see the difference in up at each one side by side. The biggest difference to me is the sharpening process. The Newman sharpening process it's detailed or intricate, but slightly less so than the itch head because the itch heads aren't touching each other. So there's just a bunch of different things that can go wrong as you're doing that one. But they both have their places.
No.
Interesting. So that brings us back to cutter heads when, depending on if it's chip loading left or right, or what about centering?
Yeah. Who'd you say has the centering?
So H3D has a cutter head. It's an insert. Used to be the Hermann's cutter head, but H3D bought the Hermann's cutter head here. And on their planers, the H3D heads, it comes to a point in the center there, which is good for chip evacuation up the center. But again, if your dust collection is not set up in that fashion, what's the advantage? Versus the bird heads, which do not have that point to the center, almost like a triangle, like a V. And some of the other manufacturers, they do not have that style. There's a place for it. There absolutely is. It helps with chip evacuation if your dust point is toward the center there.
Is that the only benefit of that, or is it? What are some of the other?
They give similar cut quality is what I've seen. I mean, you're cutting with either a 12 by 12 or 15 by 15 insert there. So I mean, it's a similar or the same insert, you know, unless like Bird, theirs are slightly proprietary. Some of their inserts you can't use anything other than Bird versus a lot of the other run of the mill guys. Like there's spiral heads that are being made in Taiwan and China and Germany, Italy. I mean, everybody's making them. Those you can just use your regular insert, you know, and same thing like with that H3D head, you know. You're not married to having to buy your insert specifically, unless, of course, they specify it, because there's different thicknesses of those inserts too, you know, 1.5 mil, 2.5 mil, or whatever.
Right.
So
It's all preference.
Yep.
Preference thing. It almost goes back to like a T.O. Madison conversation. You have guys that will sit there and swear by their Madisons and don't want to touch anything.
It also
else.
comes back to the insert head versus say the quiet cut head or the itch head. You don't have to sharpen the insert heads. You got dull knives. You take them all out, put new ones in.
Anybody can sit there and do
Yeah,
that.
you don't have to have that knowledge and waste a day or two maybe sharpening and then setting your planer back up.
You may run into more issues with a knife blowing up when it hits a knot, but
Yeah.
you can pull it out, put a new one in, and you're
Yep.
back up and running.
Yeah, you don't have to really. If you change one, you don't have to change them all. You can you just keep on going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the big benefit of that.
yeah, and you hit on a point. Anybody can do it.
Yeah.
You know, if it comes to sharpening a Newman quiet cut head or an itch head, you have to have someone that's trained and skilled to do that. Same thing can also be said about a straight knife head. You know, you have to have someone that is skilled and trained.
When you're Nate, when you're going out to train somebody, I know you've gone out a few times to do training, how to sharpen these heads. How many times do you have to go back and reteach till it actually clicks? Or is
Well-
it like we go out, train, and it clicks? Or
The way I do it, so on a let's say on a Newman where the bottom head pulls out of the machine, it's a lot easier to see how the setup and everything goes. So they can kind of watch me real closely on how I set the follower and how the grinding stone touches the knives. And then I make them do the top head themselves, which doesn't come out of the machine, and it's a lot harder to do. So they have to be paying attention to what I tell them, and then I'll help them along the way, but I'm not going to do it for them. That's, you know, you struggle along with it. It's how I get them to learn, and it seems to be working. I haven't had. There's a few places I have to go back to every once in a while because they have employee turnover, and you know they go so long between sharpenings that they need a refresher. But some of the ones that are sharpening 4 and 5 and 6 times a year, they're usually one time there and they're good to go.
no. Now, is it more? Are you seeing more people having you train, or are you just getting more that are saying, "Hey, every twice a year, come out, sharpen this for us"? Or is it?
It's a mix of both, I would say. I get some of them like, hey, we got new guys that are going to be running this now. We come out and train them how to do it and spend a day or two showing them how to do it. And I have other customers that say, hey, it's the fourth quarter. Come out here and sharpen this for us. We do it every quarter for them.
Yep.
Well, and something with that too is having the same guy come out, work on that machine that really knows the machine
it's
as well.
a consistent finish then, because like the one I have out in Western PA, I can sharpen that one in probably less than 6 hours and do the alignment and everything, and the product looks the same every single time, and it's very nice coming out of it.
When you can contest if somebody's in there and doesn't know what they're doing,
Yeah,
you could wreck a cutter head and
Oh yeah, yeah. You have your setup wrong. You could run a cutter head into the bed plates and cause some major damage.
excellent. That was a great explanation on that side of it.
Well, and that takes us to another point here too. Retraining is mostly due to attrition. You know, people leaving the company or getting fired or whatever,
Transferred out.
out.
something.
That we're seeing that a little bit more. You know, people are bumping around from job to job here these days. So instead of this being somebody's machine, this is their baby. You know, this is
Right.
what they run all day, every day.
You had a guy that's ran it for 35 years, and now he left, and now nobody has a clue on how to do it.
Yep, that's exactly it, and that's starting to happen. And you know, the knowledge, it's not what it used to be anymore,
Right.
and that's, you know, beneficial for us because of having to give more training and everything like that. But not necessarily great for the customer because they're having to pay for the additional training and the resource and everything like that. But it's a necessary evil.
I feel like that's why we're starting to see so many more people request the insert cutter heads. It used to. I feel like when I first got into the industry, the only thing anyone ever wanted was a Newman head, and then we went through COVID where employees became more of an issue trying to get them. Your good labor guys that really understood how to do it either retired and moved on, so you lost a lot of that knowledge. Where these insert cutter heads, I mean, if you can
Swap it out and you're good to go.
take a torque wrench and understand that when it clicks, you stop tightening.
Yeah.
That's about the only thing you can screw up.
Some people still can.
I know.
I'm going to add this a little bit because I've been a part of this experience a couple times. So when you are rotating those knives, you have to make sure that all of the dust is out of there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because if you do not, you will get a high knife.
Or you'll crack it putting it back in.
I kept putting it back in.
First time it touches wood, it'll blow apart.
I've had multiple instances with my customers. Hey, I've got a line. I was like, you have a high knife.
Yep.
There's probably some dust or there's something that lodged in behind your insert there, and that's what's creating it. It's just a matter of figuring out which one it is.
So Nate, when you're setting up one of those, do you have a specific process? Do you take them all out, clean out the whole head down?
Yep. Take them out, clean the whole head down. Usually like brake clean, spray the whole head down, scrub it down, blow the dirt off of it, and basically start from scratch.
And then just keep.
Put them all back in, torque them all down, and go from there.
That's only if you're completely replacing a set. If you're just swapping just say a little 12 by 12 insert, you're still cleaning, you're taking a rag, something,
you gotta
cleaning
make sure
it.
That the land where it mounts is cleaned and
That's now some of them Newmans. I mean, what for feed speeds are you seeing some of them get up to?
some of them I actually did one down in Florida 3 years ago. There was one guy feeding the machine and he was outworking 6 guys sorting afterwards.
Holy cow!
It was very impressive to see.
No, I can beat that. One of our customers, they have 12 people down on the end tailing, and they're putting out consistently 60 to 70,000 board foot through their Newman 382 planer daily.
Daily, wow.
Yep.
I'd like to hear that smack talk in the lunchroom. What are you guys doing? I'm out working 12 of you.
Yeah, yeah. And this guy he had to be pushing 50, and there was like 20-year-olds, and they could not keep up with him.
That's pretty impressive, really.
It was something to see.
Awesome.
Well, think of it this way. Some machinery, that's just the nature of what it is.
Yeah.
You put something through and it's coming down onto a pull chain, you're putting 20 boards, 30 boards a minute through there. That's enough to keep people busy down on the other end.
Yeah.
Same thing can be said about a gang ripsaw. Say you are running 12, 10 boards a minute going through there instead of coming out just one piece. It's coming out, 3-4 net rips at the end of it. All have to go into an individual
Different sorted.
Well, you're trying to sort it. You're going to have a 3-inch piece that goes in this bunk 5 feet away. You have a 8-inch piece that goes in this one.
Thing also to be said, though, the guy that's up there feeding the planer, feeding the ripsaw, they need to have a little bit more of a brain about them, too.
I think he was getting a kick out of it.
Yeah. Little more on the skilled side.
Yeah.
He sits alone at lunch.
Yeah.
Well, good point. Green Street guys, we were talking one day and they only have one, I think they have a 20-inch planer in there, and, they're hit or miss depending on what type of jobs and stuff they have coming through. But then they had one where they had quite a bit they were machining, and they were taking the two of them back and forth and then resetting up the unit. So we had talked about, it's like, okay, what do you do? Do you really jump up into a bigger planer that you're not going to gain that much more speed, or you just add another one similar to what they have in those scenarios to keep your cost in line, because you're not running them every day. You might be running that a couple big jobs maybe once or twice a month.
I know we're talking about a completely different price budget, but for that middle size cabinet shop, I really, really like the planer sanders. That's because it eliminates a second machine having to be there, and everyone will either have, well, most people always have a planer and they always have a sander.
Yeah.
That's so to put the two of them together, eat up, get rid of another spot on the floor to get a little extra volume and be very versatile is huge for a lot of these shops, but it is a much bigger investment.
Yeah. What type of investment are we looking at? Probably on the bottom side of it.
You're talking anywhere between 50 to 100 for,
Yeah, which is depending on the size of your shop and the type of material you're running through it. That's quite of a jump.
That's only like one side as well, right?
Yeah.
Like
only
yeah.
single-sided. Yep.
Yeah. Then how much can that planer blade usually remove? I mean,
So
in
your
general.
planer blades on a sander, typically I have a guy pushing over 1/8 of an inch. It's
yeah?
pushing pretty heavy.
That is pretty heavy.
It's a little more than I expected, actually. Yeah.
He's changing his knives out quite often,
I imagine.
but he's doing it, and then they run a 60 grit head behind it to get rid of any knife marks or anything.
Do they have to pound it through with a hammer?
No.
I have a customer that does that, taking a 1/2 inch off top and bottom. It's
On what?
Yeah. Where
straight plane.
It's an Oliver Shadow plane.
Yeah.
Well,
The first time I was out there,
is that reclaimed stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you guys doing? They're over there just hitting it with sledgehammers. like we only want to do one pass. I'm like, just do 2. It's gonna save everything.
Get a bigger hammer.
that's like we get the motors in, and you can tell the beds are just
Yeah,
completely
with
dinged up.
Well, and the reality of it is it comes down to, customer A is different from customer
Absolutely.
Yes.
B,
Some-
C, X, Q, whatever. I mean,
Sometimes customer B wants to use a hammer.
Yeah. And maybe customer B has a really good mechanic that just likes to work.
Job security on that side of it.
Yeah.
Well, when you start looking at that with the planer sander combo, we were just talking about that a little bit earlier about one of the saws that we'll get into in another episode. But if you're looking at 2 machines to do that, you can do it all in one machine. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the benefit there.
it's also weighing out the budget too. I mean, say you just need to run 24-inch wide material, and you're just hitting it with the sander, a single head or a 2-head sander. I mean, a double head sander can range from 30 to 50 grand, depending on the features. And a planer, could be 15 to 25, 30 grand, dependent. So
Right.
you're still under the cost.
Yep.
I mean, it's all in a matter of, is your time that valuable or not, and the frequency in which you're going to run it. And it's shop to shop. It all
Yep.
varies,
But most of the times, a lot of these single-sided planers, maximum that you see in shops, unless somebody's getting into a whole nother animal, is 24, 25 inches wide. Now they're gluing their panels up, and they're only able to send them through the sander and wish they could send them through a planer. Where even if you go with a 37-inch planer sander, you can still handle a lot of your panel goods, 43-inch, 52-inch, and still have a planer and sanding at the same time. So the panel goods is where some of the planer sanders come in as well, because we see a lot of people, they glue up their own panels, but then they send them out to have them planed or surfaced, bring them back in, and they can run them on their planer, or not their planer, their sander.
Well, and that's a good point because, with a lot of this niche market, with a lot of the shops that we're dealing with that are, let's call it 1-2 man to maybe 5-man shops, they're doing just a lot of just one-off type of jobs, and that's a much more versatile piece for them, especially when you get into all the slab style work that's being done today.
Well, in food for thought, the planer sander was designed specifically for the wood panel business. That's what it was designed for. And correct me if I'm mistaken, the U.S. is one of the few places that actually utilizes planer sanders. I remember hearing that in the past, years ago. I don't know if that still holds the case, but they were designed for panel business. here in the U.S.
That's the one thing I've never really looked at what Europe or any of the other countries outside of the States are doing for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get too many service calls to Europe.
You don't get to go to Italy to work on a plane.
No, I was only in Italy one time but
Did you go to Frumac?
I was in Fromac for 19 days.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for 19
Yeah.
days.
It was supposed to be 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Was that when you guys almost got
No,
locked?
no. Kyle and Andrew were
No.
over there when the country shut down the day after they left.
Yeah,
All right, tell us all that.
There. Oh my, yeah, that was exciting. We just before we left, they took our temperature when we were going through the airport, and they were gowned up inside of. We had no idea what was going on. Just randomly, there's this guy in
So give us a timeline.
and he was there. Oh, I don't know. I mean, it was. I don't remember the dates, but I think it was 2 days after we got back that Italy was locked down. So we missed it by that much. Yeah. But then we went from Italy up to Germany and then to England and then home. So we even missed a flight in I think it was in Germany we missed a flight. Nope, it was Austria. We missed a flight in Austria. And so that delayed us a little bit more. If we would have been delayed too much more, we definitely would have been stuck. Although if I was stuck in Austria, I would not have minded. That would have been good.
You went skiing while you were out there as well, didn't you?
Yeah, went up into the Alps and not skiing, snowboarding.
Yeah, let's get it right.
Yeah, that was a great time. I really enjoyed snowboarding in the Alps.
So I wonder why they're not using it as much over in Europe then.
I'm not sure. Like I said, years ago, I heard that this was for the U.S. market. I'm not so sure. They might be utilizing it more now, but I don't know. It's a good question. Something we could talk to some of our customers that have overseas, locations and everything like that, and dig a little bit more.
Yeah, it must be a lot of the style of work that they're doing.
Well, that's it. Their market's really different because, I mean, if you just look at the way they build their buildings, they're very different than ours. I was very
It's more to a modular
surprised.
type of setup where we're freestyle. U.S. is freestyle, always has been.
I think we're also utilizing a lot more solid wood over here. Over there, I think they're using more, plywood base and melamine and panel processing in general.
Yeah.
They are
Everything
very
I've
big
ever
up
seen
marketplace.
in Europe or anywhere was always panel processing. I can't say I've ever seen a solid wood plant over there.
I'm sure they exist. We
I know
just-
that, yeah, I'm sure they do, but
I mean, Frolmat comes from Italy, so I mean, they deal mostly in just solid wood. So there's got to be some market there. Yeah.
yeah, but the cabinet doors and stuff they're putting together, I mean, a lot of it, it's MDF. They're cutting MDF strips the same way we cut solid wood.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
future digging for us just to look around and ask around, amongst our different industry contacts, and see what
they're doing.
Yeah.
Have you had anybody that you put the planer sander into that eliminated their planer, or they still kept that in as?
Yes and no. I replaced a few planer sanders that have already been in. We've put planer sander. We've sold a planer sander to replace the planer, but the planer just kind of went somewhere else in the plant where they're mainly just focusing on solid wood, where
Yeah.
they didn't have to bring their solid wood over to the planer to prep it before other
So they
work.
actually saved in the transfer time.
Yes. So that was
So I can answer with a yes. I've had customers that have had double-sided finish planers that were in line with sanders. They pulled those double-sided planers out and went to planer sanders. We didn't sell them the planer sanders, but they were going planers or a double-sided planer of S970 Newman and S97 Newman, the older, and going into top and bottom sanding lines. So to answer your question, we have had that. I have personally. So
And what did they see from that? Did they see production increases or?
Not really. I mean, this was in a line. So this was just for calibrating their panels. It would go through the 970s and the 97 first, and then it would go into their top and bottom sanding line. It just changed the line. It shortened their footprint down, of course.
Footprint,
Because-
maintenance. You don't have another machine
Yep.
running.
So actually quite a bit then. So wonder how much square footage they actually saved with that.
I don't know.
Well, an S9's, you're
970 at peak speeds running 90 or 100 feet a minute, which they weren't running at anywhere near that speed because obviously wide belt sanders are typically not running that fast either. So
Right.
you're probably looking at a 6x10 square minimum that the machine took up, and then if you allow
We
for
probably
doors.
have to have a staging area after that too, like like an 8 foot long, so they can change speeds down to the. Yeah,
Yeah, your board has to be out of that planer before it goes into something else. I mean, it doesn't have to, but typically
you should, because if they're not running exactly the same speed,
you start pulling and wearing other gears out, and
yeah,
you can transfer chatter.
Yep. They had a transfer belt in between the machines.
yeah.
So you're gaining a lot more.
You're
than
gaining
that.
a lot of space. The biggest thing that they gained out of that was space savings. Whether they gained production or not, I mean, I'd have to.
Well, they might have been picking up some finish quality too.
That's true. Yeah, that as well.
So pretty interesting. Just not one scenario that fits anything. Depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And
Nope.
we're just trying to shed a little light on what we come across. And
Well, the other planer we haven't talked about yet that is starting to become more and more common in some of these bigger rough mills is a self-centering planer, where I think, Cody, you've had a little bit more experience than I have with that.
Yep. So with the self-centering planers, they're finding the center line of the board and they're taking material off, and it helps with stress. I've had a couple customers that have switched from just regular 382s, EPR, Newman planers over to these self-centering planers. Think of it this way. With the Newman planers, there's a lot of stress and they're getting cracks on the end of the board and they're smashing those boards versus the self-centering planer where it floats, and it tries to take cuts, to help equalize the board and help remove stress. And it increases yield too with that. If you don't have the end cracking and you're not breaking boards because of all that additional stress, I mean,
so the cutter's on a float.
The cutters are still, but the infeed wheels will
they'll help center it.
center the.
I believe the cutter heads are directly above each other, right?
Correct. They are directly
Directly in line, so that's actually
Yep.
setting your precise thickness because you
Yes.
will always be the same distance apart.
Yep.
So then, yeah, they just have
The top and bottom
flexible-
infeeders what are floating.
Yep.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep, and the manufacturers of these machines, I mean, they're guaranteeing 3 to 5 thou of tolerance
Yep.
throughout the boards there. So they're high tolerance machines. They're roughing machines. They're not finished planers. They are roughing planers through and through, but they're getting a high tolerance going through the machine in that fashion too.
Yep. They're
And then their yield is increasing.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep.
It's the other thing that they're doing is if the moisture content in the board changes after it's been planed, if you're taking a quarter of an inch off the top of the board and only sniping the bottom, not sniping, but removing a very small amount or not even cleaning the bottom up, the bottom is going to draw more moisture than the top or vice versa. So with them being equally planed, the moisture content's going to soak in evenly and help prevent cupping as the board sits if it's not used straight away as well.
Which in turn has given us a better quality product,
Yep.
more stable and down the road.
Yep.
Yeah, big takeaways is it helps drastically with yield.
Yeah.
That's why Time Savers calls theirs the yield saver. So
Yep.
that's the big thing with that, and think of it from this standpoint. Say you save 3% on a million board feet. That's a lot of money right there.
That's huge.
Yep. Or even 100,000 board feet. That's still a lot of money. Anywhere you can increase your yields, and you're going to save money, and it'll pay for itself over time.
What kind of costing are those machines into?
They're starting out. right around $500,000, just under $500,000. So they're not cheap machines. It's not for a small shop with a low production unless, some shops accept a longer payback on a machine, but,
Well, the stave companies have really started to gravitate towards the self-centering because they're not necessarily worried about the finish. They're just trying to get as much yield out of that board
Yep.
as they possibly can. The bending industry, they don't care necessarily that a board is super flat, but they need it hit on all edges so that when it hits the steam room, it is ready to, everything's been hit so it can absorb the moisture the same, that's where that's going. If you're scanning your product as well on one of the camera systems, optimizing systems, these yield savers and the self-centering are cleaning the board up evenly on each side so that there's not as much miss, because when the cameras see miss, they don't know what to do with it. It's not a completely clear board. So now they're seeing this rough spot and they're like, what in the heck is this? How am I supposed to judge this fuzz? I can't tell where the grain is. I can't tell if there's a knot in there. And it may try to cut that spot out if you're going through like a chop saw.
And that's really where the yield comes back into play even more so on that as well.
Yep.
Because now your optimizing is,
You're getting a clearer picture of what your board actually is.
yeah.
Separate topic here. I mean, scanning technologies, they're only as smart as what you program and tell them to be.
Right.
The reality, they can do things so much faster than the naked eye, but there's going to be some sacrifices that you'll make along the way too. You're going more for speed and more for throughput, but they're only as good as what you tell them to be. In the last 15, 20 years, the cameras and the technology have come a long way though, and the resolution, it just keeps getting higher and higher and higher. So
Nate, have you gotten to work on any of the self-centering?
No self-centering planers yet that I've gotten to work on now.
well, the time will come.
I'm sure.
They're gaining popularity. I mean, Ryan hit on a couple of industries where he's seeing that's growing. I'm expecting to see more of it, in shops that are just selling hit and miss plane lumber. They're increasing their yield, and that's getting passed down the road to their customer too. So,
Well, let the customer decide what they want to do with it at that point to whatever
exactly.
finish quality they're after, which makes sense as well.
Yep.
Which typically, if anybody's just selling hit and miss lumber, the customer is always going to take it and typically planing it again, but it's getting it ready for maybe a 15-inch Oliver to be
Right.
able to handle it. And they're not trying to remove an eighth of an inch, a quarter of an inch. Like this, like the top and bottom may, if it comes from the rough mill, too thick.
Yep. So hit and miss planing is giving it a rough thickness dimension. They call it hit and miss because think of a rough board, it's coming off of the sawmill, hasn't been surfaced whatsoever. Hit and miss plane, there's going to be sections of the board where it is planed, and there'll be sections where it'll still be
Hasn't
rough.
been touched.
Yep, where it has not been touched. So
Well, that's like Newman's thing with their ACC toes is their claim is they won't make a thin board thinner.
Yep, and that's been a technology that Newman's been relying on and selling with pretty much every single one of their roughing planers for, a number of years now. So,
The automatic cut control.
Yep.
Nice.
Also fun thing too. So Newman also has an anti-lap device that goes on the infeed of their planers. That's to help prevent double feeding of boards. It's not supposed to happen, but it does happen. And it is a sight to see when it does happen.
Turns a board into a piece of veneer.
Yep.
So yeah, we touched a base on quite a wide array, and coming up from the very bottom side, and it can be a very difficult decision of where to land.
Yeah, I think they covered it pretty well here. I mean, if there's ever any questions on it,
Just call us.
Yep.
we'll help you out there.
We can walk you through it and
talk
get you-
about some upcoming events here. That's Brian. You're headed up to.
Yeah, upstate
Makers.
New York and the Catskills. We just had Jeff and Rob on from Green Street Joinery last week. That was a great episode. So that we had a good time with that, and they're part of this makers camp in Durham, New York, I believe is the town, and it's blacksmithing and woodworking
really?
and timber framing. So yeah,
Ooh, that's
if anybody
cool.
wants to go up with me,
I'd kind of like to go.
Sounds interesting.
I have
it's-
to install it. So
but yeah, I'm going to
Darn.
shoot by
I have to work.
after work. It's on a weekend.
Oh, there you go.
really?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
It's well, we have the.
I was like, okay,
So I'm
I
going to
can
shoot
go
by
again.
Taylor earlier in the week, and I have some customers in that Hudson Valley there, and then the Makers Camp is 6th to the 9th, and should be interesting.
You staying up there?
I am, yeah. Actually, I made my own room reservation, and then I got talking to Jeff and Rob, and they're like, "Hey, we have 2 suites. You can have the other one, and we'll share the room," because they didn't know. They thought Jeff thought his wife might be coming up, and so I'm looking forward to it. I've always been into timber frame stuff and done a fair amount of stuff myself, and just with the blacksmithing and everything else. So we're going to go up. I don't know if we're going to take anything. We'll definitely have our team machine handouts and stuff, and make an appearance. And anybody has questions with items, we'll be there. So I'm looking forward to it. Should be a lot of fun. Beginning of October there. The weather's beautiful. It'd be, I think, almost prime time foliage.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
there, so
well,
that-
they're starting to change already. That's we go up. Well, we have Wood Pro coming up over the 12th and 13th of October, which is typically when we would always go up for salmon fishing. Well, I seen a picture here the other week that they caught one in the river, and the guys, they were going crazy because there was a couple yellow pieces on the trees where the leaves are starting to change. So they were trying to claim, and it's always a big thing of who can catch the first fish, and everyone trying to say it's not true, the fish aren't there. So yeah,
Well, I think
leaves are
Jeff and Rob,
starting.
they go up there as well, salmon fishing
Yeah,
right
yeah.
there in Pulaski. So yeah, they were trying to get me to go to that one. I haven't dusted off the fishing rods in quite a while.
I've always wanted to do that.
We were up there
That'd be
years
fun.
ago. It's actually a pretty good time.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a few areas to go, and the trussels and stuff. I took Derek up when him and another little kid when they were maybe 10 years old. Yeah. They were in the rapids. They had a good time. I think they had more fun just splashing around the river than fishing.
Them rivers aren't like anything around here in central PA. They don't
No,
even
we
compare
call
to
them cricks.
Susquehanna. Wow. The crick that's running 3 times as fast as anything around here.
Yeah.
They're wicked.
So it should be a good fall coming up here with different shows. If anybody else has anything, other events they'd like to see us at or have any questions about anything, hit us up on the podcast at RT Machine. We're always looking for new guests and feedback and what you guys would love to hear.
Yeah, there's tons of events that we're not aware of. I've been talking to different vendors that have been at events, over the last several weeks too. I mean, we had the AWFS show here a couple weeks ago, and I know there was a little show down in Mexico this week, and prior to that, there was another show up in Oregon, if memory serves. But we're always looking and interested in talking about different events and things, ways that we can get our brand out, and try and sell more machinery. So if anybody has any other suggested events, networking, things like that, just let us know about it. So
Yeah, and it doesn't make any difference how small they are and what you guys would like to see us at, or even, bring a smaller type of piece of equipment or something, and whatever we can do, just resources with it, or general knowledge that we can bring to the plate to help people out.
Also, if anybody has any events that they want talked about, we can talk about it here and let people know.
Yeah, we can plug you up
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, I'm looking forward to these fall events. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yep.
I've always enjoyed going to like the Lumber Means festivals and stuff too, but I think we missed those. I think they do them in July, like in Cherry Spring. That's actually a pretty good one. That's chainsaw races and log rolling and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
that was earlier already.
Yeah, that's a pretty neat event. That gets packed up there.
Yeah.
We used-
Chainsaw race. That sounds safe.
oh, well,
Yeah, we have them run for a mile with the chainsaw.
While juggling.
While juggling, juggling chainsaws.
Then they have to cut a tree down
Yeah.
and run
Oh,
back.
is that where they cut through the log as fast as they can?
Oh yeah. Big tune pipes. I mean, that's
Not like
my
the
kind of.
V8s.
I
Two
was
man
thinking-
pull saws.
I seen these you have belt sanders. You plug them in, they just go down a track.
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what
yeah.
I was-
That'd be fun. Oh, do that with a chainsaw. I get it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That'd be awesome.
It's like, well, that,
Yeah, if you've never been to
Zip
one,
tie the throttle.
not gonna be a dad
off
to
they
catch
go.
it.
Yeah, who's catching that one?
if you've never been to any of the lumberman stuff, it's pretty fun. It's a pretty good time for sure. The what else do we have coming up? I think that's
Wood Pro. I
Wood
mean,
Pro's and we still don't know what all we're taking now because we
We'll
can't
figure it. We'll figure it out
figure it
one of
out.
these days. You
Yeah,
know.
well,
we'll know the week before.
Yeah, probably.
May-
We'll have to
may-
show
maybe?
up to show up to find out.
Or it'll be whatever we just put on the truck.
so spread the word. You know, we're love to have people on. So expand to what your business does, that type of thing, and or whatever we can do to help you out. We have a wealth of knowledge here, and you know we're happy to help and make everybody's life a little bit easier. So, you guys have anything in closing?
Well, I think that's all for
We
today.
were pretty winded today. We had a good episode. So, thanks for everybody for tuning in. Till next week, we talk to you later.